Hi, I'm Tammy Potter, and welcome to the Pregnancy Process Podcast, a show designed to help you navigate the hugely transformative journey to motherhood, where you'll hear the unique experience of experts in this area and the incredible stories of women sharing their conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys so that you can have a healthier, more informed pregnancy. And in today's episode, I'm talking to accredited sports dietitian, Peta Carige. Peta has been a dietitian for over 18 years. During this time, she's worked at the elite level with Rugby Australia, the NRL. She supported the women's 2016 Olympic gold medal performance in Rugby Sevens. She's worked with the Australian Women's National Rugby League team, the Gillaroos, and is currently based in Brisbane, where she's supporting a large number of Olympic hopefuls. From a personal perspective, I've had the incredible opportunity to work with Peta for a number of years. She was instrumental in helping rebuild my relationship with food after a disastrous bodybuilding comp prep left me with multiple issues with my nutrition and my relationship to food. Peta helped me navigate my celiac diagnosis and everything that came with it, and after that, my dairy protein allergy. So to say Peta has been instrumental in my own journey with nutrition and gut health is an understatement, but we aren't here to talk about me. We are here to talk about women in sport, professional female athletes, and the women who support them. We're going to talk the sacrifices professional female athletes need to make when it comes to their conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys. How being a professional athlete can at times be at odds with motherhood, especially when it comes to conception, and the impact pregnancy and child-rearing can have on women's sporting careers. Peta, thank you so much for your time today. It is fantastic to have you here with us.
It's all right. Happy to be here.
Fab. And I almost feel like I maybe haven't done you justice when outlining just how prolific in professional sport that you've been, but especially with elite level female athletes. So if it's okay with you, can we start talking about your experience with working with elite female athletes?
Yeah, I've always worked with individual athletes, but probably I was really lucky in 2014 to work with the first full-time female contact sports squad in Rugby Sevens. So that provided a really amazing steep learning curve. And the staff was so fabulous in the sense that we were very open to the fact that we were learning about women being full-time. And so I was with them for 7 years up until basically the end of 2020. And then during that time, there's been an amazing growth in women's sport. I was then working with the Gillaroos, so the Australian Rugby League women's team, and now we're working with individual NRLW teams, seeing a lot more private clients that are active athletes, young Matildas athletes, sprinters. So I suppose it's definitely wasn't intended, but working with female elite athletes has definitely become a little bit of a specialty with me. And then other Olympic sports, working with female athletes, athletics now, paddle Australia, canoe slalom. So yeah, racking a few female sports up, which is just, I never thought that would be the case when I started out my career. So it's been a fabulous, positive deviation.
Amazing. That's fantastic. Now, obviously, I know you in a little bit more of a personal way, having worked with you for a number of years. And I really don't want you to feel like you have to talk about your own personal journey into motherhood and the challenges that you've faced. But what I really want to know about is how you've been able to draw down on your own experience to help support the women that you do work with. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a nice side learning from being pregnant and having 2 children, is that it definitely better equips you to support your female athletes. I had one female athlete have a baby before I had my children, and then I've worked with 3 Olympic athletes since, which is pretty amazing since I've had my children. And where it has equipped me is just fully understanding every aspect of the pregnancy and post-pregnancy journey. And then also I was really lucky that I was extremely active with my first child as well. So I could relate to the training loads and how to juggle that and the hunger and things like that. But then it's post-pregnancy that I think the athletes have really appreciated having someone that knows about nutrition, but then also has had children. So those conversations around hydration and breastfeeding, micronutrients with some of my endurance athletes. And then even I had one of my athletes call me, she's no longer one of my athletes, ex-athlete, I should say. She's now under another dietitian, but just call me out of the blue and I just need to speak to a mum. I just got some mum questions. So I think it's definitely equipped me for the nutrition questions and the practicalities of the changes of the body, but also as a female that works in sport, I'm going back into very similar environments post-children. So I can really empathize with their demands on their time and the demands of actually being in a sporting environment, if that makes sense. So I think and I hope the athletes have really appreciated that from being a healthcare provider that actually understands the environment they're returning to as a mum.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit, because elite female athletes in sport is something that I feel not a lot of people really get access to, right? Or they don't have a major understanding around the different complexities that it means to be a female elite athlete. So with performance-based health and well-being being very high on, these professional athletes' priorities, can we talk a little bit about the changes and potential sacrifices that female athletes need to make during their kind of conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys? And then on top of that, I'd also really like to know what type of wellness support do they receive from their teams? And feel free to answer these from your own personal perspective, as well as a female working in sport. So you've got a couple of different ways you can answer that if you like. You can answer that from a personal perspective of what it's like working in sport as a female that's a mum, but also from a female athlete perspective.
Okay, I'll start from a female athlete perspective. I think from a female athlete perspective, it really varies depending on the sport and the support, their funding, and their personal support network. So it is very different depending on the sport. If an athlete doesn't have to return to work, or they've got a training schedule which is 2 sessions a day, they're not full time. Being a mother, I think, is if they've got the support of family to help with the caring during those 2 sessions a day, is actually fabulous, because otherwise they're at home. So I feel like those athletes that are in a position where they don't have to work and they just get to train is actually an amazing environment, because they have like their 2 sessions a day or 1 session a day, and then they're able to go home. But that requires them to have personal support. Where I think is a little bit more challenging is which is, I suppose, the minority now, but if you think of the AFL and the Rugby Sevens and the NRLW, where it's more their full-time training, and I think Matilda's that situation, because they need to either have family support or support from the sport that they're involved with to have flexibility. Do they attend every day, or is there childcare available? So that's where sports are still learning, and I think different sports are providing different levels of support. The one thing that most sports are now contracting in those full-time environments is paying for a family member or support to travel. So when they actually have to travel to compete, that's previously been very challenging because you'd have to leave your child at home. But now most sports are actually factoring in that they're able, and they will pay for someone to come along and bring their child up until the age of 2. So that's been a huge transition and positive thing for women in those full-time sports, if that makes sense. More of the individual sports, they have to source that support themselves, but I think their actual return to training is somewhat easier, if that makes sense, if they have that personal support. So I think that's something too that, yeah, it's actually a really great time if you do have that support, because you get to just train and then go home and be a mum.
Yeah, because you're also filling up two different cups, right?
Yes, yeah, like their
Yeah.
training, forgetting that in those situations, the training is their work and
Mm,
it's not a 9 to 5 job, but
mm.
it's when they actually have to be at training 5 days a week and then travel, where I think those female athletes will find it challenging and have to have the better support provided by the sport that they're involved in.
And what type of support is there? You've just spoken about like full-time sporting environments and then, you know, athletes that may need to train twice a day. It sounds like we are getting more support in this area. What kind of wellness support do they receive?
The wellness support, especially in the team environments, is often quite good. It's just the issue is bridging the gap of, I think, the staff and the coaching staff, who are often males, and understanding what the female athlete might require. But I think then it comes down to the environment that each sport creates, in the sense that if they need to bring their child into training, then they can. So it's more around that culture, a safe space to breastfeed or pump, which is definitely, I think, improved, but probably still needs to be improving. And that's one trend, I think, out of those. So 4 athletes that I've worked with, but the 3 that returned to like an Australian level,
Mm.
2 of those 3 stopped breastfeeding quite early to be able to accommodate their training demands. So I think that's definitely, those statistics will be collected more and more, but I think that will be an area that the sports will find out that they have to do better at. And I don't know if is it physical demands, or is it space to pump? Is it the time logistics? That's where it gets a little bit more complicated. But I think that's where we might need to improve our support and find out what athletes need to help them feel like they can breastfeed for longer.
Because there is definitely a lot of sacrifices that female athletes need to make. And I know I've certainly had conversations around the increase in female athletes opting for egg collection earlier in their career to help enhance their conception chances later in life so they can focus a little bit more on their sporting careers now. Do you have any experience with this? Have you got a perspective on this? Because obviously, being an elite level athlete as a female, there is certainly going to be aspects where it does affect your hormonal cycles. Not that it should. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that as well, because a lot of them are quite lean, they train a lot, and that can actually mess with the menstrual cycle a little bit. So can we maybe talk about the effects of elite level athletes as females on the menstrual cycle and on conception?
Yeah, so hopefully it doesn't, but I think that comes back to the fact that as the women's sport's growing, they're now starting to get a lot more education around that, in the sense that they shouldn't be losing their period, they shouldn't be going into secondary amenorrhea, and that's not okay. So I think as the financial support around health providers is increased with female sports, then that messaging is going to be there more often. It's definitely improved in the last 5 years, but still not where it has to be. The way I describe female sport is that the product that we're seeing and the product that we're demanding of the female athletes is of a very high standard, yet the supports put around them is still amateur. So they don't have enough health support around them. So they're not getting that education. They're not having education from 14 like the male athletes receiving. So their education around their menstrual cycle and around their menstrual health will come and will improve. So therefore, it shouldn't be impacting their fertility in the future. So I think that's one area to recognize, that it is actually an education that needs to improve to help protect their fertility. And then I think it comes down to an individual. And I think as we progress in this area, hopefully all female athletes feel like they do have the support and the financial support, that if they do fall pregnant, they can come back to it. There's no reason why they can't. And more athletes are doing that. It really makes me feel upset and sick in the tummy when there are quite a few conversations where you can tell that a female athlete wants to have a baby, but they're putting it off. I really want every female athlete to feel like they can have a baby whenever it suits them, and they have the support to get back to the highest level.
Because it really does sound like there's such a disparity. We all know that there's a disparity when it comes to men's and women's sport. So from your perspective, you really feel like education is something that's going to help bridge the gap there, and funding. So financial support, education is going to bridge that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also making sure the professional development of the staff working with female athletes.
And what would that look like to you?
I think the staff and coaches and S&Cs all need to be actually have experience with working with female athletes that fall pregnant and then helping them return. And if they're not familiar, then they need to have experts that they refer to, which I think will only improve as more women are brave enough to actually have a baby and then try and return. So that's the only way we learn, is by experience. There's a lot more research coming out. I know one of my athletes, that we tracked her the whole way through her pregnancy and to return. So there'll be a lot more data to help health professionals improve their professional development and knowledge in this area as we move forward the next 5 years. I think there'll be a huge difference. It'd be a really interesting study, actually, to just even look at the age of female athletes, what age they're having children versus their male counterparts. It's probably a 10-year difference, I would guess, at the moment.
I would probably say that as well. And it makes me like, we've seen prolific world number one athletes have to actually give up their sporting careers and sacrifice their sporting careers for the sake of having a family. And that does break my heart, makes me really sad. With professional sport still lagging behind men's in terms of funding, where do you see changes needing to be made in order to support professional athletes who are also mothers? You've talked about, and not only the athletes, but also the women like yourself who support them. Let's talk about that a little bit, actually.
I think it's quite...
Because we've talked a little bit about what we think the athletes need.
Yeah, I mean, I think the athlete support will get better. As I said, there's a lot of research. Like, someone reached out to me to be part of research literally yesterday. So I think there's going to be a lot of research to help the athletes and figure out exactly what support they need as we have more athletes have babies and return to sport. They're really upping the ante in that, because there is a lot of unknown, but I think the research is now getting done. The ironic thing is that female staff are in the exact same boat and are returning to the exact same conditions, and it's never spoken about. Yeah, I'd say it's really hard for females working in professional sport to have babies in return. And it's almost like this unwritten, the only way you find out about how hard it is by talking to someone who's gone before you, and how hard they've done it. There's no support there. And you have to remember that in professional sport, you're working with mostly men. So the considerations, and they just think if you can't hack it, then they'll just find a male to replace you, basically. So in both of my babies, I worked up until 2 days before I had them. And the first one I returned in 3 months. And if I didn't return in 3 months, I was going to lose my contract. And then I was lucky that my husband had maternity leave, but I breastfed him until 14 months, and breastfeeding while working full time in professional teams. There's no facilities. I've pumped in many toilets. I've pumped in change rooms. I've been at stadiums doing 12-hour days, and they wouldn't open up a private room for me to pump in. I've pumped in locker rooms and had a tour come through while I was pumping. You name it, I've breast pumped during consultations with male athletes. I've actually found, and that's where it comes down to culture. Yeah, I was working at a league team, and sometimes I'd jump in my car and pump in the car and turn on the aircon, and the players would walk past and go, "Holy crap, you're pumping." But then other times I'd go, "I don't have time," because you've got really small windows working with athletes, really small, because they've got full-time training days. So if you need to pump in the middle of those sessions and you're doing consultations and your boobs are about to burst, I'd just put the breast pump under my shirt and have consultations. And the good thing there with male athletes, a lot of them have had children, so they were actually fine with it. So I think 9 times out of 10 in those situations, the athletes are fine with it, but you've got to make sure the other staff and the culture of the professional team are fine with it. And I was really lucky at one of my clubs. They were completely fine with it. The athletes were fine with it. And it allowed me I started going back in 4 weeks post, either taking my baby or just popping in for a couple of hours. So in some teams, it's very accommodating and easy. And other teams, you're expected to be there, and your male bosses, as they're all male, if you can't perform the duties, then they're happy to move you on. And
that just seems so, I'm sorry to cut, but that just seems so counterintuitive when we need more women supporting women in sport, that it's such a male dominated industry already, and the health and well-being industry is already quite male dominated. So I understand what that's like. But then I think once you go up another level into that elite level strength and conditioning coaches, it is so male dominated. And yet what we actually need is people like yourself who are able to support women going through this and understand what it is like for them. Yet at the same time, if they're not able to accommodate this, then they can find another male who's also not going to understand the process. And it's almost like this self-fulfilling vicious cycle that needs to be broken. So how do we start breaking this cycle to make sure that more women are able to continue working in sport? Because I already know some S&C coaches that were working in professional sport as a female, supporting other female, but haven't been able to return to work because they've had children. So then we've already lost great female coaches there. So how do we break the cycle of making sure that elite female athletes are also being supported by females who have children? Does it come back to culture, safe spaces, and just more understanding from male support staff? There's got to be more.
Yeah, I think it has to come back to, I'm really hoping I don't have the answer. I'm hoping all the research in the female athletes, someone has a light bulb moment and goes, ding, 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 what about our female staff? Like, I'm really hoping at one stage someone draws the connection that there's staff working in the exact same environments, doing longer hours, that don't have that support as well. But then it's also going to take education of the males in those situations to be aware and have that awareness, and maybe get that feedback from those female athletes going, oh my God, it's been invaluable having someone on staff that works in this environment who has had a child to help me through it. I don't know if we need some specific feedback from the athletes themselves. There are some male staff that are very aware of it, and they're often, I've had some great directors that have understood the challenges of returning to work post children and allowed some flexibility. But I think I've had 3 just off the cuff conversations with high performance managers recently that have automatically assumed as a female that I work part-time. I'm like, no, I would do full-time hours but in 4 or 3.5 days a week, nights and weekends to compensate. So there's a lot of assumptions from male staff. And then they also have made comments like, oh, it must be so hard being a working mum. I'm like, what about there's working parents? It's a working parent situation. And also what we will see, and definitely what I've seen in the trends, is that less female staff are working with male teams. So now they're just shafting them to the women. Which I don't necessarily, but it's seen as, oh, you're female, so you will want to work with women. Whereas you need that exposure. And then the male athletes aren't getting that education or exposure. And the staff that are working with the male athletes aren't getting that education and exposure. So I feel like the staffing in professional sport has a long way to go. And some of the stories are just horrendous from other peers. And I think I've had some really positive experiences. As I've said, like I've had clubs and cultures that have been fabulous, and I've had some really horrendous experiences. Like I would never wish someone to tour breastfeeding, have 13-year-old kids in the change room, or a physio I worked with years ago. You got to remember, 10 years ago there was no female locker rooms, there was no female toilets at stadiums, so you're pumping in male dirty toilets at games and at stadiums. It's just horrendous. And the extra mental load of having to have everything with you and being able to sanitize, and it's definitely challenging to say the least. And I definitely think there's a huge assumption as a female staff working in professional sport that you will not return full time and you will not return to the professional teams.
But I feel like everything that you're saying from a female staff experience must actually mirror the female elite level athletes experience as well, because I am sure that what you're feeling, what you're experiencing must also be felt by the female athletes. Would you agree with that?
I think it is to some degree, but now it's in their contracts and now they have
Right.
contracts to protect them. The staff don't.
Mm.
So a lot of the female athletes now, and that's only happened in the last 2 years. So it's in their contracts that they get paid maternity leave, and they're given, is it 6 or 12 months to return after their maternity leave to try and make it back to, they get a training period, and then it's in their contracts that they have a staff member that they get an extra person paid for. Some teams have that for staff as well, but a lot don't. So I feel like the athletes are now in a position where some of this is getting protected for them, but it's not always the case for staff. But I'm hoping all the research into female athletes will help female staff that work in this area. But there's just such a huge assumption once you have children. As I said, I had literally had at one club, and I love this human that said it to me. He was just literally just a lack of knowledge, but I had to have a conversation, and he was looking at getting sent resumes for other dietitians because he had assumed that I wouldn't come back. He'd already made that assumption. And I was like, when do you need me back by? That was the contract I had to return in 3 months by. And I said, that's for me to figure out, not for you to assume. I had to have that conversation. So I think that is just a lack of education, but I'm not going to say it's easy. It wasn't, and it's still tough. But yeah, I think there's a lot of assumptions made by male staff because they just don't realize what we're capable of.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And we've gone into a direction that I wasn't really expecting, but it really comes back to that kind of generation paving the way for future generations. We are and I know that we're in a slightly different age bracket, I think, but we're from a generation where we've been told that we can have it all. I know in general population, like I'm talking like not elite level athletes, what I'm seeing is a generation of women who are completely overwhelmed trying to achieve this like thing that we've been told that we can have it all. But from your perspective, how does being a professional athlete add to that complexity? Because women are already overwhelmed, right? It's already hard enough because we've already been told that we can have it all. I can't even begin to imagine what being an elite level athlete would add to that.
I think you can't underestimate the stress, and also by having things written into the contract, you've got 6 months to return to full training, or whatever. I'm sure all contracts are different, but the extra pressure of that in they have timelines on them. If they have a baby after an Olympics, they want to be back before the next Olympics, and even just being out for, even if it's some athletes are only having 4 months off or 3 months off, same as professionals, they're losing that connection with the coach, or they might fall out with the coach, or you've got a male coach who's assuming that they're not going to come back as well. So I think you can't underestimate exactly what I've said as a staff member, all of those extra pressures that are put on them due to the generation ahead having lack of knowledge, or haven't seen it before, or I've never seen a female come back and be the same speed. I've never seen a female come back. And so they're all learning, and there's a lot of assumptions being put on these female athletes. And then also you've got a time pressure. Like that's just really stressful, because you do have to be back in time to qualify, or you do have to be back in time to get your contract renewed. So I think you can't underestimate that. Yeah, I think that's where they feel it. And then also I think there is that, I'm sure a lot of them, they're overly successful and type A driven people, they'd be putting a lot of pressure on themselves to also lead by example, and making sure that they do make it back at a high level and are successful, so the future generation sees a path for mothers to become elite athletes. I think once they get over that, I think it's actually a really fabulous occupation when you have a young child, depending on the training needs. But yeah, there's knowing the personalities that are achieving this, they're definitely putting a lot of pressure on themselves to be successful. But then on the other hand, they also have a child which puts everything into perspective as well.
That's a really nice way of looking at it. Because all of a sudden you've probably gone from being so singularly focused on this one goal, achieving this one thing, whatever it might be, whether it's a gold medal, whether it's like winning a world title, whatever sport that you play, they would be so singularly focused. But then all of a sudden it would be good, but also at the same time difficult, because all of a sudden they've got this other thing that's just as much or even more of a priority. And then they almost feel like they're split in two.
When you think about it, Tammy, that's what all of your male athletes and professional athletes, they all have babies in their 20s. And then they all start saying they have a big loss, and then their kids come on the field and they post about, oh, it's all about perspective. And that gives them like, they're happier at home and they've got that perspective and it's not the end of the world. So now the women are allowed to have those feelings too. So I think there's definite positives there. I just think early on, it really depends on the support that the female athletes have at home and in sharing the day-to-day load and mental load. But you definitely are hearing that it does give perspective, and they've got that better balance, and they've got that lovely distraction from sport, that it's not the be all and end all, and then they're happier athletes and they're more likely to be more successful. What I have seen is that they need family support to do it. So I think it's going to be really interesting when we have athletes that don't have family, but how the sports support them.
So let's talk about what returning to work as a professional athlete might actually look like.
I think once again, it's different with full-time or part-time, but in most cases, they've got a husband or a parent, like the child, able to take the children when they return to training. What I've seen to date is that has been the case. So there's been a father take some extended time off, or grandparents around to babysit. And where I think that's interesting is because that's setting them up for success over staff. So people that are staff, what we do, or professionals like normal workforce, we have to put our children into childcare. First 6 months of childcare is the hardest 6 months of your life as a working parent. So
all of the daycare bugs. Yeah.
So you've got a child that's teething, constantly ill, you're sleep deprived, and you still have to go to work full time. So that's when you see a lot of professional mums go, I can't do this, I have to go part-time, and it's the worst. Like it's just the worst. I just can't even. But the athletes tend to have family support, so they're not putting their kids into childcare. But then when they do put their kids into childcare, they are coming up against some real challenges there with sick kids, no sleep, and then trying to train. But for the most part, they're getting by because they've got family members that can look after their children. So I think that's where we're probably going to see the wheels fall off, is when we've got more, the women are getting paid better, so that they're able to put their children into childcare, and then seeing them try and return, because they actually have a platform where they can actually put their hand up and say, this is not possible, this is not feasible.
It sounds like we almost need the female athletes to start stepping up and going through this process and having a voice, because their voices are going to be, it shouldn't be this way, but their voices are going to be heard more.
I think
their cries are going to be answered. So it's almost like you need more people to go through this, because I can only imagine what it would be like training when you're sleep deprived and having to deal with all the daycare bugs and that type of thing. It's hard enough for women to just get into the gym at like that, let alone train at an elite level. So
100%, but also, so that you think that and Tammy, you know me, you know how active I was prior to children, and once a week if I'm lucky. I just don't think we have that empathy now for this, the whole you can't have it all. So if you're going to work and you have children, the number one thing that falls off is exercise. We're not paid to exercise. We're not professional athletes. And then the sleep, which we know is so important for everything. All of the working mums are sleep deprived because they're also often the ones that the kids want when they're sick during the night. So I think the workforce of mums and how they return and the support we put around them in just every day needs to improve. And the setup currently is not sustainable. We're going to have mums just going crazy and quitting and then returning part-time because they can't. But I hope all this research into the athletes actually does help the workforce as a whole, because otherwise I see so many friends and I have clients that come see me and thinking that there's something that they're doing wrong. But I'm like, I'm so sorry. This is just the first 6 months you return to work with 6 kids and you're trying to work full time and you're sleep deprived. You are constantly going to be ill because you're so run down and you're not sleeping. So you're 2 to 3 times more likely to get sick if you're not getting your 7.5 hours sleep. These mums are running on no sleep and then they're wondering why they're getting sick constantly when they're stressed. So I think the health of our mums returning to work needs an overhaul, and the support that they need is an overhaul, and that's in sport and not in sport. And I hope all the research going into athletes helps that, because women can't have it all. And currently the setup, I don't think, is sustainable.
Let's talk a little bit about that research. I know recently there's some news research that's come out around the intensity that women can train at during pregnancy, with this saying that they can now train up to 90%, which I think is a bit high. But anyway, like, I'm a bit conservative when it comes to training during pregnancy. But what's your perspective on that particular bit of research, but also the research that you've been talking about around pregnant athletes?
I think that's great. I feel like I've actually seen athletes not being able to be in the most physical fitness because they've actually been forced to follow the old school rules of not over 140 beats per minute. That's never made sense to me. I was playing elite touch when I was pregnant and up until 5 months, and it just seemed crazy to, when you've got a really high fitness base, to then drop it. So I think logically women have been doing that, but we just haven't had the data to support that. And we've just erred on the, or let's protect you because we just don't know what's going on. Let's just
But
put you
140 BPM is like way different to 90%. Like 140 BPM, depending on your fitness level, 140 BPM, that's like zone 2. And I totally agree with you in that respect. Like, you can't take someone that's an elite level athlete and then put them into zone 2, 140 BPM. That is terrible. But then again, there's like a massive difference to 90%. And I think maybe in terms of elite level athlete, you could get them up to that 90%, but a general population. So in terms of elite level athlete, I would 100% think that research is fantastic. But I guess where I'm coming from with that would be my concern about general population women pushing themselves to that 90%.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% correct. And I have seen elite level being forced to stick to 140 BPM, and
that's insanity.
Comical. I'm a doctor, and I'm just going, I don't understand. Anyway, so
sorry,
I
just think that's hilarious.
I know. Don't worry. Yeah, and like they have to do what the doctors order. Yeah, it's insane. But no, you're correct. And I know there's research coming out on a specific athlete that has trained up to that 90% through her whole pregnancy and was completely fine. So I think, yeah, we probably once again need more research on active but not elite women to see what's safe for them. And especially if they're starting exercise, when they fall pregnant, how do you gauge that if they're not training with someone who's an expert in the area? So I think we definitely still need to watch this space, but gosh, we need more research with everything with women, don't we?
I think so. I think what you're saying is true. Watch this space. And I think the fact that we've got such amazing support and turnout and that type of thing for sporting teams like the Matildas, who are doing amazing things. So there's definitely more of a push in this direction, but you are completely right. It's almost like they are competing at an elite level, yet the support that they are getting and their support team are getting is amateur level. And that's absolutely needs to change, because I'm sure even the support teams for the male teams are not at an amateur level.
As you know, that women have not more complications, but we are more complicated as nature, and we have syndromes and diseases that put us at risk of long-term damage, like secondary amenorrhea or PCOS or pelvic floor. So we're more complicated, yet they have less support and less education the staff that are working with females. So that needs to change, but I think it's a few years away.
I'm just going to ask you one last question, if that's okay. And that would be, and you can apply this to anything that you would like in terms of whether you want it to be general population, support staff, or elite like level professional athletes. But what's the one thing that you wish women knew before they had a baby?
Unfortunately, the hardest part is when you return to work. I think that is just not spoken about, and everyone talks about the birth. You'll get through that. Women are amazing. You'll figure that out. The hardest phase you will go through is the 6 months when you return to work. And no one tells you that, and you have no idea how hard it is. Like, it's just insane. And that's when you need the support. That's when you need family members. That's when you need people to drop around meals. And if we want women to be returning to the workforce, that's when we need to all be looking out for them. That's when I think friends and myself, that's when I felt like I was having all the breakdowns and crying and trying to quit my job because I just was so sleep deprived and so stressed and so exhausted. So I think that's something that we need to get out there. And that's where all the workplaces and all the family support and all the social support, which, I feel doesn't really exist these days due to social media, but that's when we need to wrap our arms around women.
So interesting, because so many people that I've spoken to have all talked about there being too much focus on the birth and not enough focus on all of the stuff that happens after. And I definitely think that also needs to change as well. Gosh, we've got a long way, but we're getting there, aren't we?
We are getting there, but I think also women need to start speaking up about that return to work challenges. So it is a little bit on us, but then I suppose the fear is that they're going to lose their jobs. But I think, we need to improve that process and improve those supports. So I think that's an area that we definitely need to speak up to. And I feel really bad telling people that. I've got a pregnant colleague now, and I'm like, don't worry about anything until you return to work. It's hell. Like, how do you feel really bad? But I'm like, you just have never been through anything tougher than that. The first 6 months of return to work is just hell.
I hope
then you have to fake it and breast pump, and you're still like pumping and trying to act happy, and it's just hell.
Hopefully we can see changes in this where the cultures are changing, especially in such male dominated industries like the sporting industry, where we can see women get more support, have more kind of safer spaces for them to pump. The fact that there weren't even like female locker rooms until 10 years ago just blows my brain. Like,
locker rooms, female locker rooms have only come about terming like the last 2 years.
What was that?
Female toilets and female locker rooms are like the last 2 years.
That is just
like,
I can't even believe that. Blows my mind. It's archaic.
It's only new buildings. So the rugby sevens, for example, they built a whole new building. So they obviously had female locker rooms. But now moving forward, like, it's only been the last, when places are even like local fields are being developed, that they're now putting in female locker rooms. Like, it's all completely new. So when, 5 years ago, and then people that working in sport 10 years ago, there was no female toilet for them to even breast pump in. So they're pumping in male toilets at stadiums. So look, we have come a long way, but it wasn't that long ago that it was pretty dire.
Yeah, wow, that actually just blows my mind. It's like, how long have we been allowed to vote for? Like, sorry, but in my head, I'm making that comparison. But I'm thinking, we've been allowed to vote for, 100 years or something, yet there's no female locker rooms until 2 years. That's just like insane in my brain. Sorry.
Insane.
Well, I think, the fact that you're right, people need to know this stuff. People need to talk about this stuff. So thank you so much for your time today. We don't very often get to speak to people that have worked with 3 Olympic athletes and other female athletes in the team environment going through this pregnancy process and all the aspects of it, and then returning to sport and what that actually looks like, returning to work, what that actually looks like when you work in sport. So thank you for your time today. And I know that you're about to go off and speak to more female athletes, so I will leave you to do that.
Well, thank you for having me, and hopefully I was able to share some different insights into female athletes, but also just females working in sport and the juggle. And you can't have it all.
No, not all at once, I don't think.
Not all at once, but it is not the males to assume what we can and can't have. So I think that's also important.
That is very important. This conversation went in all. That's a thing that I love about these podcasts, is because you can have one idea in your mind about where it's going to go, but then it might go somewhere completely different. So thank you so much for taking me on that journey. That was amazing. And if you're hearing this message, I want to say a huge thank you, because it means that you've listened to this entire episode. Of course, if you have any questions about the things that we covered in this episode, or want to know more about me or my other projects, you can find me on YouTube and Instagram at The Pregnancy Process. For those currently in their conception or pregnancy journey, you can actually apply to join my complimentary but private community, the Preggy Training Crew. And you'll find my community application and social media links in the episode description. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, I absolutely encourage you to share it with other women just like you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.